Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bill for consideration is the National Insurance Corporation Amendment Bill, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of the bill is to amend the National Insurance Corporation Act, Cap 16.01, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a short background, Mr. Speaker. Cabinet, by conclusion number 342 of 2021, approved the request by National Insurance Corporation to allow for the payment to be made by the National Insurance Corporation to a third party for short-term benefits, long-term benefits, and funeral benefits to funeral homes. With respect to short-term benefits, an employee must instruct the NIC to make such payments directly to an insured person's employer. In the case of long-term benefits, such direct payments are authorized to be made to an elderly home, a financial institution, or an organization approved by the National Insurance Board. Mr. Speaker, it also amends the funeral grants. In terms of a funeral grant, the amount is paid directly to the legal representative of the deceased, a person appearing to have a valid claim, or a funeral home where written instructions have been received from a person who is the beneficiary of the funeral grants, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bill amends the interpretation section of the Act by including definitions for the following terms: elderly home, financial institution, money service businesses, and organization. The bill amends sections of the Act that deal with contributions or benefits being paid to and funeral grants, Mr. Speaker. In that section of the Act that provides for contributions or benefits to be inalienable, a new provision is inserted to cover the beneficiary's notice authorizing the Director of National Insurance Corporation to pay the short-term benefits to an employer and the long-term benefits to an elderly home, financial institution, and organization. The amendment of the section of the Act on funeral grants authorizes the payment of the funeral grant to the legal representative of the deceased, a person appearing to have a valid claim to the grant or a funeral home, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the National Insurance Corporation is constantly relooking at its services and the services it provides to the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. And one of the initiatives, Mr. Speaker, undertaken by the NIC, Mr. Speaker, was a departure from paying benefits by check to paying benefits via digital transfers directly to the claimant's bank accounts. This upended a previous accommodation to employers whereby benefit checks payable to employees would be sent to the respective employers who had paid the full salary to an employee absent from work because of illness or childbirth and had filed a claim with the NIC in that regard. The employer would then have the employee endorse the check to the business entity. This transition to digitalized payments forced employers to reconsider the arrangement for reimbursement from employee benefit payments. After consultation with stakeholders on the issue, and considerable concern was expressed about the challenges that would face employers in recovering monies paid to employees in circumstances where these employees were paid in full during the period of absence from work. This was of particular concern to large employers, especially the government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about the government is continuing to pay all the NIC contributions made by its workers, Mr. Speaker. And for the first time, Mr. Speaker, from 20, Mr. Gerard, you know when? From 20, when the government paid in full all the NIC contributions from the employers. So the government has paid in full. So the government does not really owe contributions to the NIC, Mr. Speaker. In addition, Mr. Speaker, NIC pensioners who have voiced an interest in assigning their benefits to a financial institution where they do business and to the elderly homes in which they reside. For instance, financial institutions generally require assignments of income, and such an initiative would facilitate these pensioners conducting business with these institutions. NIC pensioners who reside in elderly homes are sometimes unable to transact or experience difficulty in transacting business with these homes and may wish for these institutions to act on their behalf, especially about their pension monies. It was also recognized that the assignment of monies from a funeral grant directly to a funeral home would assist the personal representatives of the deceased in meeting the cost of the funeral expenses by reducing the amount immediately payable for a funeral. Funeral homes are more likely to allow credits with the certainty of the eventual receipt of the monies from the funeral grant from the NIC. In light of the above, Mr. Speaker, the proposed amendment of Section 38 of the Act allows for a beneficiary to instruct the NIC to pay a short-term benefit directly to his or her employers, a long-term benefit to a financial institution, an elderly home, or an organization approved by National Insurance Board. The proposed amendment to Section 61 of the Act allows for payment of a funeral grant directly to any funeral home, provided that a personal representative of the deceased or the person appearing to have a valid claim gives notice in the prescribed form to the director. The forms to support the proposed amendments have been drafted in the regulations to be made to supplement this amendment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I invite members of the House to pass the National Insurance Corporation Bill to strengthen the NIC's legislative framework to provide and to accommodate for their clients, Mr. Speaker. What we are saying, Mr. Speaker, is that this act will make it simpler and make it easier for people who receive NIC benefits in the short term and in the long term, Mr. Speaker. This means before, when somebody receives a check from the NIC for being sick, you would have to sign behind it and pass it over to the employer. That no longer exists, Mr. Speaker. Now the NIC can pay directly to a funeral home, or a pensioner can instruct the NIC to pay directly to a home for the elderly. So that will ensure that the person is taken care of by when the NIC pays their contributions. It makes it easier and it facilitates the person who is receiving the benefits. Mr. Speaker, I ask members to support this amendment.